Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Michael Coard, How to Uphold the Rule of Law.
Do not get upset when you have set me up to be who I am, that I end up being that person. And that's what I think is behind Native Son. Now, if I hear you telling that
by
story,
the way, you're such a scholar. You're such a scholar, Joe. I've never spoken to an attorney, black or white, who in the middle of a discussion cites Native Son.
Yeah.
Perfectly. Well done, Joe. Very well done.
I'm going to be monitoring you in the future to see if you steal my Native Son.
I will. Joe, I just wrote it down. Yes.
Mike, let me switch gears for a second. You and I really got to know each other over the Cheney State University litigation when we worked together. And you were the rebel rouser, I'll call you. And I was generally, and I'm no quiet person, but when it comes to you, I let you do all the talking and I'm background. But I then appreciated what a historian you are about American history, and not Black history, American history. You found out that we were doing a dig, the city and the federal government down by the federal courthouse.
Yes.
For George Washington's house. And it's now been public, but I don't think people appreciate nationally or locally your role in the president's house and the fact that there were slaves at the president's house. Give us some background to give us the real story behind Avenging the Ancestors Coalition and George Washington's house.
Joe, thanks for giving me the platform on which this story can be told. And I'm going to tell it right now. But Joe, you're probably going to hate this and you're probably going to edit this from publication. And what I mean by that is, Joe, Cheney University in 2026 is alive and well because of what Joe Tucker did in 2014. I keep telling you, Joe, that you saved Cheney by representing my group, heeding Cheney's call in a lawsuit in federal court, and then began negotiations with the governor's legal staff. So, Joe, I know you hated me saying that, but I got to
I did.
I know that, so it's probably going to be edited by the time the audience hears it. But having said that, Joe, I really appreciate you asking me about the president's house because people need to understand what really happened. And Joe, here's the 3-minute version instead of the 3-hour version. I'll give you the 3-minute version. In 2002,
I'm going to make you give the full version because it's important that we understand that people are human and people are complex. And George Washington, the first president, was a complex individual too.
Joe, you hit it on the head. We always say this. If you want to make the argument that George Washington was a great general, make that argument. If you want to make the argument that George Washington was a great president in pulling the states and the colonies together, make that argument. But can you be a great human being when you hold 316 fellow human beings in brutal bondage under slavery and illegally? And I do mean illegally hold 9 of those 317 right here in Philadelphia. Here's the backstory. Back in 2002, nearly a quarter century ago, 24 years ago, there was a local newspaper article indicating that the Liberty Bell Center, then 2002, at 5th and Market had to move. Why? Because it was too cramped, too crowded, too congested. That's the first thing. The second thing, they decided they would move it 1 block west to 6th and Market. When they decided upon that 6th and Market Street site 1 block west, historians realized, hey, back in 1790, at this very site was the president's house. It was
not stop you to give the geographic. The location at 6th and Market is less than 70 feet from the federal courthouse.
Very well done. And again, Joe, I love your scholarship because the federal courthouse comes into play in the 1793 Fugitive Slave Act, which at that time said, if somebody is accused, if Joe Tucker is accused of being an escaped slave, he's going to be taken to that federal courthouse. But here's the twist. Joe Tucker can't testify because he's a black man. He can't say, I got my papers, I purchased my freedom 5 years ago. So Joe, I'm so glad you threw in the federal courthouse. Going back, 2002, newspaper article, Liberty Bell Center moving to a larger space. Second thing, again, 2002, the largest space is 1 block west, 6th and Market, America's first White House. Back in 1790, there was something called the Federal Residence Act of 1790, which basically said this, Joe, hey, we're trying to build this new nation. We wanted to be in Washington, D.C., but D.C. is pretty much swampland. We got to build it up. While we're building it up, we're going to make Philadelphia the temporary capital. That's 1790. That's the second thing we found out. The new site of the Liberty Bell at 6th and Market is where America's first White House stood. Officially known as the President's House, the Executive Mansion, the Robert Morris Mansion, but served as America's first White House. That's the second thing. But the third thing, Joe, that we found out is that George Washington, the first president of the United States, in America's first White House, enslaved black men, black women, and black children. Joe, I was livid. I was enraged. I was outraged. Why? Because I was born and raised in Philly. Never heard of that. Went to Masterman. Never heard of that. Went to the oldest HBCU, Cheney. Never heard about it. Went to Ohio State University for law school at the time, the largest university in America. Never heard about it. So I felt betrayed. At the time, I was working with the great Charles W. Bowser, Esquire. And I reached out to activists, black activists throughout the city, called them into my office, relayed the story, and said, we need to do something. And I'll never forget, Joe, at that first meeting, somebody said, okay, we're going to be called the TAC. I'm thinking ATTACK, that makes no sense. They said, no, Mike, you always talk about the ancestors. You always talk about avenging the ancestors. Why don't we call the group Avenging the Ancestors Coalition? The rest is history. Joe, we were organized in June of 2002 for 8 solid years, protesting, demonstrating, petitioning, agitating. After that 8-year period, precisely, Joe, on December 15, 2010, there was the grand opening of the first, this is important, the first slavery memorial of its kind on federal property in the history of the United States of America. Right here in Philly. We did that. Everything was great, Joe, until it wasn't.
I don't think you get enough credit that you are the person that when the dig happened and they were digging up the president's house on federal property, you had them specifically show the slave quarters where they were enslaved at the president's house. And it became a federal memorial because of something you started in the back office.
Joe, I got to tell you, I love being interviewed by people who've done their research. Because when you mention the slave quarters, Joe, the slave quarters on that President's House site, that was the most contentious issue. And here's why. When the Liberty Bell Center moved from 5th and Market to 6th and Market, it was moving toward the south side of 6th and Market, toward the back. Here's what we found out, Joe, that if you look at where America's first White House was, you have the entrance, you have the fireplace area, you have the kitchen area, and then when you go outside that property, there's the slave quarters. The reason why that was the biggest battle, Joe, is because the slave quarters, where it officially was and where we have it replicated now, when they moved the Liberty Bell Center to 6th and Market, now, Joe, as you enter the Liberty Bell Center, because the slave quarters is about 15 feet away, as you enter the Liberty Bell Center, the heaven of liberty, you literally have to cross the hell of slavery to get there. And the National Park Service agreed with us that that's the height of historical hypocrisy. They fought against it, but eventually relented. So we have a replica of the slave quarters 10, 15 feet away from the main entrance to the new Liberty Bell Center.
Now, describe for those people who've only seen it on the national news or local news, how it was set up before what we're going to talk about happened. What did it look like?
Certainly. What we did is, again, attack agitated on its own. We did something ingenious, Joe. When we were founded in June of 2002, We did our rabble rousing and yelling and screaming and all that kind of stuff, but we were strategic as well. We decided to send letters to every Black elected official based in Philly. So if you were city council and Black, you got a letter. If you were the mayor, as John Street was, and Black, you got a letter. If you were a state rep or state senator based in Philly, you got a letter. If you were in Congress based in Philly, you got a letter. The letter basically said this: hey, did you all know that slavery existed in Philadelphia, in America's first White House, at 6th and Market? Liberty Bell Son is moving there. Can you help us to tell this story? And eventually they agreed to do that, but there was pushback. And here's the thing, Joe, I gotta give you credit where credit is due. In 2002, there was a Republican federal administration. George Bush was president. Now, I can say that George Bush was an ally in our attempt to tell the story, but in all fairness to him, he was not an obstacle.
Yes.
He pretty much just took a hands-off approach, and we respected that, unlike what we're dealing with now. So everything worked out well. We put out requests for RFQs, RFPs, and we got this. I didn't know what to look for or ask for in terms of a memorial. Because initially, Joe, the battle was a battle of degree. The National Park Service agreed to tell the story, but what they wanted, Joe, was a George Washington monument with a small slavery component. We wanted a slavery monument with a small George Washington. Why? Because the argument we made is this: George Washington has more statues, memorials, monuments, museums in America than any other individual. So let's level
until Donald Trump gets finished building his memorial.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Joe, I would have thought that was a joke you just told, but that could be real. That could be real. So what we were able to do is to fight for those 8 years, win on December 15, 2010. We then, even before we got the memorial, we put out a request for qualifications, request for proposals, and the design that came up from a Black-owned and operated architectural firm blew us away. That's not my lane. I didn't know what I was looking for. Was I looking for a statue? Was I looking for a waterfall? Was I looking for a museum? I didn't know. But then the Kelly Maiello, Black-owned and operated architectural firm, came up with a replica of the actual 1790 house. So when you walk in, you see that entrance that George Washington walked through. When you walk in, you see the large bay window on the left side and 2 large bay windows on the right side. The same thing George Washington envisioned. Not only that, Joe, they did something that was ingenious. When we began the archaeological dig, as you referred to, we're trying to see what's underground. We're thinking it's nothing, so we'll just build over it. One of the archaeologists stumbled across what appeared to be a wall, then found it was a foundation wall. Joe, they found out that the foundation wall of the kitchen area of America's first White House was pretty much intact. And what we said is, and this is an afterthought, I gotta admit this, instead of throwing dirt back on top of that, we were going to create what's known as a vitrine. Joe, I had no idea what a vitrine was.
Is that what that is? A vitrine?
Yes.
Where we look down and we
That's
see...
exactly it. It's a large glass enclosure. I didn't know that until I got to the dictionary. When they mentioned at the meeting, I pretended like I knew what the hell they were talking about. After the meeting, I'm like, oh, it's a large glass enclosure where, Joe, you look down into 1790. And the policy of George Washington was that the enslaved Black staff was not permitted to walk on the ground floor or the upper floors without permission. They had to spend almost all their time in the kitchen area. So you're looking down where those Black folks spent the bulk of their time and where George Washington's white staff also gets it. So we look down through that vitrine, but Joe, it gets better. Not only is it a replica of the actual first White House, but there's that vitrine. We have 5 motion activated TV monitors. So when you walk up to it, you see reenactors playing the role of the 9, reenactors playing the role of George Washington. It gets even better. As you walk toward the back, there's this large granite wall with the 9 names engraved on it. It gets better. As you walk further, you see the slave quarters area that you were talking about gets even better. Once you leave the slave quarters, you're steps away from the Liberty Bell Center. Every time I talk about this site, Joe, I always say this part is best. Then the next day I'll say that part is best. It's all great.
But you had the plaques there too,
Yes.
which were so significant also because they give the casual reader, the casual historian, their quick read of what was going on there. How did you come up with the idea of having those plaques there? Because you have people like Absalom Jones there, great Americans who were there on this wall. How did you come up with that idea?
Joe, I got to say this, and usually when I say stuff like this about hosts, I am pandering. But now, Joe, I'm not pandering. The questions that you're asking are key. It shows me that you know the site, you researched the site, because that's what the litigation is all about today. Here's the story. We call it plaques. The technical term that they use at the National Park Service is interpretive panels. And there are 34 interpretive panels which do exactly what you said, Joe. They enlighten the casual viewer, the tourist, about what this represents. Those 34 interpretive panels, they're the heart and the soul and the blood of the site. Because if you don't have that descriptive information, you have no idea what the hell you're looking at. After the grand opening, December 15, 2010, everything was great, absolutely great for 15 years. And
Stop.
then
I want to do the lead in for this one.
Please.
So I'm often at federal court and I'll walk over and I'll take a look at it. More than just a casual viewer, but every time I go there, I can't help but think about you. And I was like, I can't believe Mike pulled this thing off. I was like, I can't believe this. And not to underestimate you.
No doubt.
But I did not think that you would be able, with your rebel rousing, to be able to get it done. So then we come along and we have this dude who's at the White House now, who is probably the worst thing since Andrew Jackson, Woodrow Wilson. And I like to think it's not a Black memorial that you have down there, American History Memorial. The plaques are taken down, or the interpretive panels are taken down in a very unceremonious way. They're just taken down, and we are all just outraged, from the mayor to the governor. But I don't think that they quite understood the federal government, that they were fighting against Michael X. Coard. So, Mike, I've let it in. You fill that in now for me.
Joe, you laid the perfect foundation for me to respond. I know what you meant when you said, hey, Mike, I'm not disparaging your skills, but, this thing is amazing. How'd you get it done? There was a meeting, I'd say sometime maybe about 2 years before the actual grand opening, 2010, where National Park Service bureaucrats, just so people know, you have on the local level, Independence National Historical Park. Above them, you have the regional entity, the National Park Service, and on the federal level, you have the Interior Department, which governs all that. So I'll never forget, Joe, maybe 2 years before the grand opening, there was a public discussion about the site. And at the end of the discussion, Joe, this white, middle-class, Republican bureaucrat came up to me at the end of the meeting. He said, Mr. Coard, I've never met you before, but, quote, you're quite the voice of reason, unquote. That's what he said to me. And I'm thinking, I got him. Because my whole thing is, people need to understand, Joe, I raise hell on the streets to get your attention. But then once I'm in the room, and you know this better than I do, that yelling and screaming is not going to get it. You have to have the law, the history, the facts, and you reason with people. And I don't know what this guy thought I was going to do at this public forum, but he was shocked when I began to talk about the article I wrote in the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography, all those kind of things. So yeah, the yelling and screaming is to get your attention because you won't listen to me otherwise. And then once I have your attention, now I can tell you what I know. So I'm glad you said the other thing, Joe, very quickly. You talked about the issue of American history versus Black history. We tell people that our fight in 2002, our fight in 2026 has never been about Black history. It's been about American history, because America as we know it wouldn't be that America without slavery. Prime example, slavery began in the Virginia colony 1619, kind of sort of ended with the 13th Amendment. And you know why I say kind of sort of ended, because you read the 13th Amendment, it doesn't say slavery is abolished. It says, comma, except following conviction of a crime, which laid the foundation for mass incarceration, which, by the way, was written in large part by the Confederates who lost the war. How do you allow Confederates to be in Congress to help write the 13th Amendment? We can talk about that later.
We can talk about that later on.
But getting back to your point, so yes, it's American history. So here's the thing. January 2025, the guy in the White House issues dozens and dozens of executive orders. Every single one pertaining to black people is anti-black, anti-DEI, anti-affirmative action, anti-critical race theory. We knew then and before what was going on. Follow me. And I know folks are. That's January 2025. Fast forward to March of 2025. Issues an executive order which says this. Hey, I'm looking around at all these federal historical sites, and I don't like them because, quote, they inappropriately disparage Americans past and living. That's the exact quote from that March executive order. He says, I'm looking around the country, I see these federal historical sites, I don't like them because they inappropriately disparage heroic Americans. That's March. Fast forward to May. His Interior Department Secretary, to explain, Doug Burgum, specifically targets 6th and Market and says that there are 13 things among those 34 panels that he doesn't like. Joe, the common denominator, each of those 13.
Hold on, set us up. Set us up. Common denominator is, drum roll. Go for it, Mike.
I love the way you laid that foundation like a real TV show host. The common denominator is the horror of slavery, not just the loss of freedom, but the rapes, the sodomy, the beating, the whippings, the separation of family. He didn't like that because as far as he was concerned, slavery might have been kind of like going to jail. You lose your freedom and that's it. But no, those 13 things that the problem that all went to the horror of slavery. So what happened with that May directive from Trump's Interior Department Secretary Doug Burgum, he targeted.
You said his name first. You said the T name. You said the T word first, so you lost.
And you're right. You're absolutely right because I go out of my way. My radio show audience would attack me as a hypocrite right now. So that's the word. That slipped out. So I call him the guy in the White House. And I actually tell the media that. I'll never say his name. I guess I feel so comfortable with you, Joe, it slipped out. But having said that, so we get this directive from the guy in the White House's Interior Department Secretary, Doug Burgum, targeting 6th and Market. And in that May directive, Joe, it had a 120-day deadline. That takes us to September 17. So as of September 17, 2025, that site, America's first White House, where George Washington enslaved 9 black men, women, children, could have been shut down as of September 17. But here's the interesting thing. My group attacked, Joe. We began to come out and hold weekly events beginning in August, waiting for the September date. Joe, our small 99.9% black organization known as ATTAC, ATAC, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, we morphed from a small coalition to a mega alliance. I'm talking about white folks joining in, Jewish folks joining in, Muslim folks joining in, older folks, younger folks, gay, straight, blue collar, white collar, formerly illiterate, formerly literate, PhDs. You talk about the cross section. Here's the best example of the cross section, Joe. Michael Coard, this angry black radical, this pan-African socialist, I'm standing shoulder to shoulder in one of the rallies to save the site with leading Republican powerhouse attorney George Pachetto, with former 2-time Republican mayoral candidate Sam Katz. Can you believe that Michael Coard, George Pachetto?
I was watching you on TV going, this man pulled this shit off.
Well said, Joe. That's the perfect way to describe it. And we were able to bring in so many people, and now we're fighting the good fight. We won, as you know, in federal district court, and I argue.
So hold on, you jumped up. So here's what happened. So I can get the news everyone was there as they tore down the panels. People were pleading with them as these fellow workers were following orders.
Yes.
Tear down the panels. They tear down the panels. And this is where they again underestimated you. You said, okay, you might have won that small battle, but we're going to win the war. You then filed a lawsuit, and then everyone gets involved. The mayor, the city solicitor, the firms in Philadelphia, all the way up to the governor.
Yes.
Saying what you did was wrong, was inappropriate. You have desecrated a great historical site. You have removed American history. We're going to sue you in federal court. Now, my church, as you know, the African American Church of St. Thomas, we had a panel there too. I get a copy of you all's complaint. Being the doubting Thomas that I am, I go, they can't admit this. I said, there's no, I looked at it and I said, nope, sorry, Mike, you losing this one. Once again, I underestimated you. What happened, Mike?
Joe, you used the word desecration, which is the perfect word, because when I tell people what happened beginning 2:57 p.m. on Thursday, January 22 of 2026, was a desecration in the perfect sense of the word. Anytime that site, Joe, was historic holy ground. That site was and is historic hallowed ground. When you defile holy ground, when you defile hallowed ground, you desecrate it. And that's exactly what they did. When they ripped off those 34 interpretive panels on that date at that time, they ripped the heart and soul out of that site. And here's the thing, Joe, in regard to, and you know civil litigation a million times better than I do, when the first legal action was filed, it was filed initially by the city. At the same time, our group, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition, through our attorneys, Professor Kara McClellan, Esquire of University of Penn, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and a currently unnamed white-collar firm in the city, all came together. And here's the thing: we didn't want to step on the city's toes. They technically beat us to the courthouse. We looked at their initial complaint for preliminary injunction, and I thought it was too limited because it focused on basically a contractual issue. A great argument nonetheless, but didn't really get into the history of race and racism and slavery. That's where we come in. And Joe, I'm going to ask you this question. Our legal team was trying to decide a number of things very quickly on that same date, January 22, 2026. Do we file our own separate complaint? Do we file a motion to intervene? Or do we file an amicus brief? And everything is political. So even though you might have a perfect legal strategy, you got to factor in the politics. And I won't say anything because, Joe, if I tell you the backstory, they have to kill you. And I don't want to kill you. So I'm not going to tell you.
Not because I know, because then who would you get to represent you if you killed me?
Excellent point. Excellent point. So based on factoring everything and giving the city a big shout out for what they did to initiate, we decided to join in with filing an amicus brief. Something different might happen soon, and I'll stop right there.
Well, it ended up in front of Judge Cynthia Ruth. And I had only seen the city's complaint. And I was like, this is the tough thing. She has a lot of political pressure coming from the mayor, the city, the governor, everyone. And she also has the law. But she issued an opinion that was perfect. And she said, put the panels back. And the day they put the panels back, the mayor was there to thank the workers for putting the panels back. The TV, my dog Bob Marley is trying to join us here.
Joe, you and I are so much alike. When I do my radio and TV show, the bigger dog, his head pops up around here, and the smaller one's jumping on the left side. Joe, you get 2 extra points from me for being such a great dog lover. I mean that.
Well, I have Bob Marley, who's here making me pet him now, and Jimi Hendrix, who's sitting over there watching me.
And Joe, you know my dogs are rhythm and blues. And here you've got some of the greatest musicians in musical history.
So before Marley interrupted us, I was talking about, but I'd like for you to talk about Judge Ruth's opinion and what she ordered.
Joe, this is Judge Ruth's opinion, 1984 by George Orwell. Let me just spend 20 seconds reading the first line of her opinion. Quote, all history was scraped clean. In no case would it have been possible once the deed was done to prove that any falsification had taken place. Then she follows it by saying, as if the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984 now existed with its motto, ignorance is strength, this court is now asked to determine whether the federal government has the power it claims to dissemble and disassemble historical truths. Joe, I've never seen this type of fact-based opinion, law-based opinion, and history-based opinion by any federal judge, especially a Republican judge appointed by a Republican president. That's Judge Ruth. And the other thing I'll say very quickly, on page 32 of that very same order, the judge goes on to state the following. The government under the current administration claims in regard to echo Big Brother's domain in Orwell's 1984. And then she goes on to talk about the Ministry of Truth, where they will make up lies and churn it out as if it really, really happened. And final thing, in the 40-page opinion, the judge didn't include this line, but easily could have, where George Orwell wrote the following: who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. That says it all. Says it all. And that's exactly what we have right here, right now.
My little boy in North Philadelphia that you were, did you ever think that you would take on the man in the White House and beat him in your wildest dreams?
Joe, not only did I not, I didn't imagine that I'd do it twice. Once in 2010 with the grand opening, and then in 2026 with the federal district court judge's ruling. And I know that you, being the legal scholar you are, you probably have some questions you want to ask about the opinion or the ruling. But let me ask you this, Joe, because this is your lane, not mine. After we won with the district court's ruling ordering the government to restore the 34 interpretive panels, a day or two later, the government filed an appeal. Joe, why didn't they file a stay request with the appeal? For the life of me, I couldn't understand. So after they notified the district court that they filed the appeal, the district court said, but you never sought a stay. So I'm ordering you to put the stuff back. And finally, they went back to the government, to the Third Circuit, and they got their stay. But Joe, is there any reason why you wouldn't seek a stay when you file your appeal?
There's an assumption within your question that you're dealing with competency on the other side.
Somebody else told me that, Joe. Please continue. Somebody told me the very same thing.
You always overestimate your opponent. And when they don't beat what you estimated them to be, you don't help them, you just keep on going. But Mike, I gotta end this, but I just don't know any person as closely as I know you. I know people out there in the world, but I don't know anyone like you who is so consistent with the rule of law in both sections of your professional life, from your criminal defense work and defending the worst of the worst, to, I'll call it, your You know I'm a big Frederick Douglass fan, to your agitating that you do to make America true to its creed. And what you're doing with Avenging the Ancestors and the way that you do things. I'm president of the Michael Coard fan club. I want to thank you for taking some time out to talk to me, because this is just us having conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
As if we were eating at one of your vegetarian restaurants.
I love it. I love
it. Which I only do for you. And I want to thank our listeners for listening to The Rule of Law, The Academy Speaks. And if you can, check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. I'm Joe Tucker. I want to thank my good friend, Mike Coard. This is The Academy Speaks, The Rule of Law. Thank you, and have a good day.